Excitement was in the air on Thomas's branch line. Thomas and Toby could be seen talking excitedly. Percy was baffled.
Why is everyone so excited?
Haven't you heard? Mrs. Kindly's coming home.
Who?
Oh, right. You never met her. Well, you see, Mrs. Kindly was a nice lady. She was quite ill and often lay sick in bed. But a few days before Christmas, there was a landslide. She warned Thomas Morning Train about the impending collision. She saved many lives that day. Sir Topham Hatt sent her to the seaside to get better, and now she's coming home.
Now Percy was excited. He became swanky and was hard to handle.
Sober up, wouldn't you?
His driver would say, but Percy continued on. He would have his driver polish him every evening.
Please, just once more. I want to make a good impression when Mrs. Kindly comes.
If we wash you one more time, you'll probably shrink.
A few days before her arrival, Thomas had taken ill. He returned to work the next day.
Well, well, Thomas, you should take a trip to the sea.
What do you mean?
If it works wonders for Mrs. Kindly, it could work wonders for you.
Rubbish!
But just think about laying on that warm sand, the waves gently moving, the seagulls squawking.
Pooh! Sand's nothing but snow in the summer. It only causes trouble.
Nonsense! If the seaside made Mrs. Kindly better, then sand can only be a blessing than a curse.
Percy trundled away, staying firm on his belief. At last, it was the day of Mrs. Kindly's return. There was a large congregation waiting at Elsbridge. Thomas yawned. There was so much excitement the night before, he had hardly slept all night. There was a special train waiting, consisting of Thomas, Toby, Annie, Clarabelle, and Henrietta. They waited and waited, till at last someone shouted,
"Here they come!"
The engines whistled, and Toby rang his bell as Gordon puffed in with a special coach. Mrs. Kindly climbed out and was met with many cheers and whistles. "Welcome home!"
It's good to have you back.
Mrs. Kindly was moved to tears.
It is good to see you all again.
Sir Topham Hatt gave a speech, and before long, Mrs. Kindly boarded her train home. The engines puffed proudly with the coaches singing behind, leaving a rather cross Percy.
She didn't even look at me. She didn't even notice me.
And all my elbow grease was wasted.
But Percy couldn't be cross long. A couple weeks later, after Mrs. Kindly had settled in, she wanted to take a trip down to the sea. Sir Topham Hatt scheduled a special train just for the occasion. Percy was glad when he was chosen to take the train. When Mrs. Kindly boarded the train, she looked at Percy and gave a smile.
What a sweet little engine.
Percy smiled when he heard that. Percy was anxious to make a good impression. He sizzled with excitement. At last, the guard blew his whistle and Percy set it off. Percy run well, and everything went smoothly, but there was worse to come. Just outside the station throat, some boys were standing close to the track. They had a bucket filled with sand. As Percy puffed by, they threw the sand in the air, landing on Percy's face.
Ow! I can't see! I can't see!
Percy was so scared that he applied his brakes early. His driver tried to release them, but Percy put them back on. The noise was terrible. A little girl was so scared that she lost her candy floss, and it lay on Percy's nose. At last, the driver brought Percy to a stop.
My eyes! Someone please help me!
1 minute, Percy felt sandy. The next, he felt wet. Percy's eyes were blurry. When he could see, he saw Mrs. Kindly holding a canteen.
Oh no, that's it. Mrs. Kindly will never like me now.
One thing I looked forward to coming home was meeting you. I read about you in the books, and I knew I'd have a story to tell riding with you. Thank you so much for a lovely day.
She smiled, then walked away. Percy was still embarrassed, but felt better at Christmas when they threw a party for Mrs. Kindly, and she announced that Percy was her friend too. When Percy returned to the shed, Thomas couldn't help but laugh. Well, 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 Percy. Do you think Santa's still a blessing?
No, Santa is nothing but a nuisance. I don't see how it could have made Mrs. Kindly feel better. It's smarts.
It's 'cause it's the sea air that does the trick, not the sand. There's no reason to be salty about it. Percy thought Thomas was being very silly indeed. As for the boys, they said they were sorry and promised never to do anything silly like that again. For punishment, they had to clean Percy, much to Percy's driver's arm's thanks. I think the boys got off better than they deserve. Don't you? It was an unusually warm day for the time of year on the island of Sodor. As Thomas pulled a goods train down his branch line, it grew hotter and hotter. The sun baked the metal rails, so Thomas hurried over them. As he steamed uphill, he huffed and puffed wearily. Oh, this is thirsty work. At the next station, he pulled up beside the water tower. Phew, I'm boiling. I need a nice long drink. Then Bertie the bus arrived nearby. While Bertie waited at the bus stop close to the water tower, he saw Thomas was looking hot and bothered.
Hey, mind you don't burst the boiler.
He teased.
I'm glad I don't have to pull heavy trucks and run on hot rails, and all that coal you carry must slow you down.
Thomas was cross. Pah! Engines are more efficient than buses, whatever the weather. After his drink, he felt much cooler and traveled on his way. Goodbye, Bertie. You won't see me for smoke. Bertie was not carrying passengers anymore because he was due back at the depot.
I'll show Thomas that buses are best.
Bertie said. He raced along the road by the railway track. Meanwhile, Thomas spotted trouble ahead. His driver put the brake on. The sun has made the rails bend. Thomas had to go over it very slowly indeed. Next moment, Bertie sped by.
I'm glad I'm not an engine. Roads don't buckle.
At the next station, Thomas's driver told the station master about the damaged rail. When Thomas returned to the main station yard, The station master had phoned ahead to the Fat Controller. Soon Thomas was sent back up the line with some engineers to replace the rail. On the way, Thomas stopped and waited for a signal to change. He saw Bertie stuck in a traffic jam. Clouds of steam were gushing from Bertie's radiator. His driver had gone to fetch more water for it. Now Bertie wished he hadn't teased Thomas.
I'm overheated. Once I've had a cold drink, I'll be fine.
Thomas grinned. I've never seen a steam bus before, he chuckled. One morning, as James waited at the big station, the Fat Controller came to see him.
I hope you can give us a good run this morning, James. I have an important meeting to go to and I don't want to be late. Do your best, won't you?
Of course, sir. We'll have you there in no time.
Well done. I know I can rely on you.
On every passenger train, there is something called an emergency cord. If there is an emergency, it can be used to call the guard, and it automatically stops the train at the same time. But it only must be used in an emergency. Otherwise, the person that pulled it may have to pay a fine. On James's train today, there was a party of foreign holidaymakers. They couldn't understand English very well, and thought that the chain above the door was for calling the buffet car attendant. So they pulled it. Suddenly the brakes came on, and James had to stop as quickly as he could. "Oh no!" he groaned as he came to a standstill.
Now what?
Emergency, James.
Said his driver, looking back.
Someone has pulled the emergency communication cord.
The guard walked along the train to find out what was wrong. The foreign visitors were pleased to see him, but the guard was not pleased when they asked him for 4 cups of coffee. The matter was soon cleared up, and the guard told James he could go. But when he tried to start, he found that he couldn't. The sudden action of the brakes had locked them solid, and James couldn't move an inch. What was worse, the train had stopped right across the level crossing, and by now there was long queues of cars on both sides, waiting to get over the railway. James was overcome with embarrassment, but he couldn't do anything about it. The Fat Controller came, and the motorists all told him what a nuisance the railway was. "I'm sorry, sir."
Not your fault, James. But I don't know how I'm going to reach my meeting.
James didn't either. Then, a flash of color on the traffic queue caught his eye.
Is that Bertie waiting?
Maybe he could turn round and... In a flash, James's fireman was running down the road. A few minutes later, he came back, grinning broadly. "No problem, sir," he said to the Fat Controller. "He's trying to reach the same place as you. He says he'll be happy to take you when he's turned." It was another hour before a fitter came to mend the brakes, and longer still before James could get his train moving. He was very sorry, and so were the foreign visitors, but they promised not to make the same mistake again. James felt certain they wouldn't. Bulgy had been refurbished and was delivering passengers again. The farmer, who owned the chicken field Bulgy used to stay in, was flustered. With Bulgy back on the road, his chickens had no place to sleep.
My chickens loved Bulgy. They're quite partial to hen houses that were once used for transport.
He told Farmer Cole one day. "Sounds like you need a new bus, or better yet, a coach. Last winter, Toby's coach housed my newborn baby lambs." This left the farmer deep in thought. Henrietta is Toby's faithful coach. She first came to the island with Toby when their old line closed down. The station master wanted to turn Henrietta into a hen house, but that would never do. Henrietta had never given being a hen house a second thought. So this made her very surprised when Toby brought startling news.
Driver says there's a farmer that wants to buy you and turn you into a hen house.
Don't worry, Toby. Sir Topper Hat will never approve.
I know, but
But what?
the chickens do need a place to call home.
I would rather carry passengers than be a livestock car.
Toby knew Henrietta was right, but he still wanted to help the hens. A few weeks later, Toby was sent to Kronk's scrapyard.
Maybe there's something here.
His driver said reassuringly. Toby looked around, hoping to find something that would be a suitable hen house. Suddenly, Toby cried out.
That's it!
Toby saw a decaying van lying in a pile of scrap.
Good eye, Toby. That van is just a ticket. I'll speak to the manager.
So Toby's driver talked to the manager, who spoke to Sir Topham Hatt, who made the arrangements. And a few weeks later, Butch arrived with a van to Bulgy's field. It was then set in place, and the chickens wasted no time in making themselves at home. When Henrietta heard about the new hen house, she laughed.
Everything has its proper place, whether that be on the road, rail, or field.
Toby couldn't agree more. It was evening. Edward had had a busy day, and as he stopped at the last station before the junction, he was looking forward to getting home. "Get in quickly, please," he whistled to the passengers. The passengers got in quickly, and Edward's driver pulled the lever, but he found that he couldn't move. The driver checked Edward's brakes, but nothing seemed to be wrong. He scratched his head.
Whatever can be the matter?
He wondered. He gave Edward more steam. This time Edward started, but went only a little way before he stopped with a groan.
It's no good.
The driver said to the fireman.
Something is holding us back. Go see if the guard can help, please.
The fireman jumped down to the platform and ran along to the guard's van.
What's up?
Reckon the brakes have seized on. Is yours off all right?
Should be,
replied the guard, and he tried to turn the handle, but it wouldn't move. The fireman helped, but they still couldn't turn it, so they called the driver, but it made no difference. The brake handle had stuck fast.
We shall miss Henry's connection at the junction if we can't start soon,
said the driver.
Let's give Edward everything he's got and hope for the best. It'll be hard work,
he told Edward,
but I'm sure you'll do your best.
Rather doubtfully, Edward agreed. Come on, come on, come on, he puffed fiercely. Smoke and steam poured from his funnel, and slowly the train moved after him. Once they were moving, things became easier, but Edward found that he couldn't go fast, however hard he tried. Oh dear, I'm sure it's in this train. Then suddenly, there was a jerk, and everything was easy. reached the junction quickly, and while the passengers changed to Henry's train, Edward's fireman went to find out what had been wrong with the guard's brake.
One tiny nut.
He told them when he came back.
It broke and jammed itself against the brake, so we couldn't turn the handle. Then, after we started, the brake itself broke, so we could move properly.
The driver laughed.
Come on, Edward. Let's get that guard's van into a siding where it can be mended.
Who would have thought that one small nut could cause so much trouble? Each summer on the island of Sodor, a special picnic train rides were organized for visitors to the island. The Fat Controller was busy working out which engine would be free to take the picnic train. At the engine shed that morning, the engines waited patiently for the Fat Controller to tell them which engine had been chosen. "I do hope it's me," said Thomas to Percy. "Annie and Clara will have so much fun showing the visitors all the splendid countryside." The Fat Controller arrived.
I have decided that Gordon will take the picnic train.
"Oh, Annie and Clarabelle will be disappointed," sighed Thomas sadly. As they had gotten older, Thomas's two loyal coaches did huff and puff a little, but did enjoy a good holiday outing now more than ever. Gordon did not look happy.
I am the biggest and fastest engine on the whole railway. I am far too important to take the picnic train. Engines on my railway must do as they are told. Now go and collect your coaches and take them to the harbor station where the visitors will be waiting.
The waiting passengers cheered and waved as Gordon drew into the platform.
I'll show them what a ride on the fastest engine on the whole railway is like.
Gordon muttered to himself. The guard blew the whistle, and they were off. Gordon started with such a jerk that the driver fell off balance and knocked the brake off. Gordon rushed off with a loud rage. Through the tunnel he raced, faster through the beautiful Sodor countryside. By the time the driver had managed to slow Gordon, they were halfway through their trip. The passengers were very angry indeed. When they pulled into the next station, they all got off and started complaining bitterly to the Fat Controller, who had just arrived at the station.
Gordon went so fast.
We couldn't see any of the countryside.
They complained. "Please, sir," called Thomas, who had pulled in at the other platform. "We can take the visitors to a more leisurely place."
Yes, indeed you can, Thomas.
All the passengers climbed aboard Annie and Clarabelle, and Thomas set off cheerfully. Whenever they passed along an especially beautiful part of the island, Thomas slowed down so everyone got a good view. All the visitors had a lovely ride, and they all went home very happy. That evening, Thomas returned wearily to the shed. Oh, what a super day that turned out to be! Gordon was still sulking. Gordon's Picnic Express may have been the fastest, but it certainly wasn't the best. Gordon pretended he hadn't heard.
said Terrence the tractor, I don't have rails like you because my caterpillar tracks are so much better. And I can go anywhere, anywhere, anywhere. I don't need rails like you. One day I will prove it, show you how I do it. Then you will understand that you don't judge a book by its cover. Don't make your mind up too soon. Things aren't necessarily always what they appear to be. Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't make your mind up too soon. Never, 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 never judge a book by its cover. Sure enough, one winter's day when the snow lay deep and hard, Thomas got stuck, he was in trouble. And who do you think came along and rescued him that day? The snow didn't matter to Terrence the tractor. Now Thomas understands that you don't judge a book by its cover. You'll make your mind up too soon. Things aren't necessarily